listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans. This is your Overwatch League daily episode for March 16th, 2018. Today I'm joined by Heurix to finish up part 2 of our conversation about the EU side of the Overwatch Pit Championship. But first, here's your scoreboard brought to you by patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. For the first match of the evening, the New York Excelsior would sweep the Shanghai Dragons 4-0. The Florida Mayhem took on the LA Valiant yesterday and pulled out a surprising 3-1 victory. The Mayhem have just 3 wins on the season, one against Shanghai, one against the Dallas Fuel from last week, and yesterday's win over the Valiant. For the final match of the evening, we saw the LA Gladiators take on the Houston Outlaws in an intense 5-game series. The LA Gladiators would just barely pull this one out, 3-2. Interesting to note, each team was full held at least once in this series, the Outlaws on Kings Row and the Gladiators on Watchpoint Gibraltar. Coming up tonight, we have the LA Gladiators taking on the Florida Mayhem, the London Spitfire going up against the San Francisco Shock, and the LA Valiant will look to take on the Boston Uprising. All the action starts at 4 p.m. Pacific at overwatchleague.com. Here's the rest of my conversation with Heurix about the Overwatch Pit Championship. All right, we are back with part 2 of our Pit series. It's going to get me every time. We discussed the NA teams and some of the NA players yesterday. Today, we're going to actually discuss the EU side of the Pit. And first and foremost, I want to let's talk teams for a second, because I think a lot of people digest a little bit easier when they're talking big storylines and talking about the teams themselves. Which teams really stood out on the EU side of Pit?
I mean, honestly, I think you just got to go with the winners, because it was so ridiculous to see how much of a disparity there is in skill level, synergy, everything between those guys who actually did become British Hurricane. There was a little rumor going on during the tournament, and I think even before that they were going to be the London Spitfire Academy, but nothing confirmed until after it was confirmed. I mean, with a team not actually playing out an open division with that kind of roster, it was bound to happen. They obviously had something in the works. But yeah, they went out 4-0 in the groups, completely dominated. They went 10-1 in maps in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken, only dropping 1 map there. And I think they lost another map in groups and tied a map in groups. So they were overall, something insane like 22-2 or something in maps over the entire tournament. It was absolutely disgusting. They were very efficient in dive. You got guys like Craggy and Kib on that roster. And then when they actually switched things over to the tank heavy meta, they even excelled probably more than any other team in that department as well.
So as far as the tanks go, when we look at the tanks from this tournament, Lulsish, right? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I would say Lulsish or Lulsish, okay. Probably the 2 ways I would go for.
Sure. He's someone who's really kind of stood out. He was on Angry Titans, who might not be a team that a lot of people have heard of, especially if you're not watching the Tier 2 team.
I would honestly go as far as to say that if it's from EU, most people just haven't heard of it. There's just not that much, coverage and content made around some of these teams. So some of them kind of fly under the radar, unfortunately, when you've got really incredible talent over in Europe right now.
Well, and he was on No Waifu, No Lifu before that.
And that's a team everybody knows.
Right. So anyways, he's on Angry Titans playing tank. How did he perform in Pit?
Very, very well. I would say Lulsish is probably the best performing tank that I saw throughout both pits. We highlighted, some of the NA players, talked about the, how dynamic iShiny is, but I would actually put Lulsish above everybody else, just based off of the performance that we saw in Pit. yeah, you definitely got to bring in fusions into that conversation as well, because playing with British Hurricane, which was then those guys, he was definitely a strong performer, a contender for a really solid tank player to look at. But I think what really set Lulzish apart was that his performance was almost by himself. I mean, you saw him sneaking out Earth Shatters that had no business happening, actually having value and everything. Even when he was on Winston, he was finding a lot of these solo kills because, he was almost in a position where he was kind of forced to, because in some situations, a lot of his other teammates were denied just by, these strategies employed by opposition. So he was forced in some cases to actually make some of these plays, and he did actually make them. And it was fantastic to watch. I think Lulzish stepped out as, again, in my opinion, probably the best performing tank out of the 2-pit series that we saw.
Someone I also want to talk to you about in the tank role is everyone's favorite Frenchman, Knox. We saw Rogue, obviously, only some of the players, about half of them now, are in Overwatch League. And you're like, well, how is the rest of the squad doing? And I guess Knox performed pretty well in pit.
Yeah, the thing about Knox is he's an incredibly diligent player. He's a very studious player. I mean, he's the kind of guy that's going to gather up all the knowledge. He played Lucio prior, did a lot of shot calling, moved over to tank, still has that kind of ability to shot call, make sure that he's IGLing a little bit from that tank role, which is something that, teams are seeing the value in. They even, Dallas Fuel moved Taimu over to that tank role just to have that communication involved in that department, because it really can have a lot of value as a tank player, especially when you're going for dives and trying to set dives up. Having someone that is very communicative and very authoritative is something to look out for. Those are two keywords that I think have been brought up a lot over the past couple of weeks, and Knox has both of those qualities. Unfortunately, Nico fell a little bit short, and so did the entire roster of Eagle Gaming. So we didn't get to see too much out of Knox, but overall, I think Knox is a player to look out for regardless. Just perfect mindset for a competitive player to be on a roster. Definitely great awareness. We saw with Rogue, his ability to peel for his teammates was second to none. So I would say Knox is definitely a player to keep your eye on. Ideally, though, his team will perform a little bit better, so we'll see some more looks from him.
So let's talk a little bit about some of those tank roles. Well, actually, sorry, flex roles. And this is a name that's been brought up before. We had Nuki, Queen of EU Overwatch, on this show a few months back. And
Queen of my career, actually.
Yeah, I mean, just all around badass when it comes to competitive Overwatch. That's one of the very few times we use a swear word on this show, by the way. And so Nuki said that HalfAchill is one of her players to watch. She thinks that they're like Overwatch League ready players.
Yep.
How did he perform in pit?
Well, the cool thing about HalfAchill is that he has LAN experience. Very, very solid player. He's been playing this role for quite some time. I think his diva especially really, really stands out away from everybody else's, because he has the peeling, he has the aggression, he can find those vulnerabilities and then exploit them, diving onto players. And also he has shown a lot of consistency with actually lethal bombs, something that we saw Poco get famous for, and that was something that I was highlighting a lot during the cast because it was going on at the same time as Pit. Was that performance of getting those high value self-destructs, something that can really turn fights by getting those kind of bomb kills. HalfAchill was getting a lot of those, on top of the fact that he has incredible peeling, he has incredible ability to sync up with the aggression that we saw out of fusions and linking up with Craggy and Kim and Kib in some cases as well on their DPS to be able to solidify a lot of kills. And I think HalfAchill probably stands out as, in my opinion, the best flex tank that we saw out of both regions. I would say Kraken Lacken is certainly up there, but HalfAchill, I think, is just a half step ahead right now.
Let's another player that comes from the EU side of Cloud9 is Cremes, and you touched on him lightly, but is he coming up to be hopefully Overwatch League caliber?
I think Cremes is very, very close, personally at least. He played with Piece of Cake. We didn't get to see too much of him over in EU. What we did see was really solid. I think he's a player that's certainly going to even develop further, and that's something that I think should be a worry for anybody who's not on his team, because he does have a solid diva. He does have a very solid Zarya, and as he develops even further, I think he'll be even more diverse, and he'll even develop those two characters that he's already very strong with. And luckily for him, he has one of the best infrastructures that you could imagine because he's playing for an academy team. He will be playing for Mayhem Academy. So I think Cremes is close, and I think that he has all the tools now to develop his skill set further to get to that stage.
So one of the storylines that I actually watched pretty closely was watching those guys.
Yep.
They were just a blast to watch. And the DPS duo that they brought out in Craggy and Kaib is, I would say, to me, stood out as one of the strongest in the entire pit tournament. Would you agree? Like, where were they? They were definitely like the Fusion University DPS duo for EU. I mean, what we saw out of Who Are You and Zachary is pretty much the same as what we saw over in EU with those guys. Craggy is absolutely insane. I would say alongside Davin, probably one of the absolute best tracer talents you could possibly get for your money, especially out of EU. Players to look out for. Craggy has to be one of them. I mean, Craggy is right there. As just given some time, I think will certainly be at that kind of stage where, should expansion teams come and they're looking for players, Craggy should be one that they probably think about. Kib, certainly someone to kind of bring into the discussion as well, because his proficiency with Genji, especially off the dive, very, very solid. He also showed some flexibility playing out, even some of the Pharah compositions, was exceptional on Junkrat, was even better on Roadhog. So very versatile player there. And Craggy even plays the Widowmaker. I mean, it's a very dynamic duo that they have there for themselves, and I think it worked out really well. I mean, Nuki, much like she created my entire career in Overwatch at this stage, I would say really did a bang-up job just going with Craggy and Kib, because that is an outstanding duo. I would say scarier, actually, than Who Are You and Zachary, just because of how dynamic they can be together. Wow. That's high praise. There's one other DPS player I wanted to talk to you about, because I don't know a whole lot about him, and that's Sharp, right?
Right.
Yeah, and he came from Squid 1, 2, 3, 4. Before that, Can We End Early? Now he's on Optic Academy, and Optic Academy is headed up kind of by Alicus, who's kind of known as one of the real talent finders in the competitive Overwatch scene. So what did he find in Sharp?
So he found, I could be mistaken, I hope I'm right. I believe Sharp just turned 15. He found an absolutely incredible young talent.
My dog
Sharp.
just ran in here and ran out. That was crazy.
We have ourselves a visitor. But I would say Sharp is exceptional because his tracer is already so solid. He already has, some proficiency with Widowmaker. He's going to be developed by guys put in place by Alicus. So I think that's going to be something that's going to help him out as well. The coaching staff, the infrastructure at Optic Academy is going to be really high level, I think, in my opinion. So as he continues to develop, I would say over the next few years, because again, he is very young. He is at that kind of Zerg age that we saw out of Fusion, that he's going to be a player that's definitely going to be very, very scary. He might be 16. I don't remember, but he's 15. I think he was either 14 or 15, and then he had a birthday and it was like 15, 16 or something. But still very, very young. One of the better tracers out there, and I think given some time to develop, he's going to be insane. I think diversifying his hero pool a little bit as well to make sure that all of his heroes are as strong as his tracer is. If that's the case, that's going to be an Overwatch League caliber talent without a doubt.
I love seeing all these young players. It makes me feel old. I think that's only the second time in my life where I've said that something has made me feel old. I've always felt really young, but now seeing all these players play competitive games. I'm like, man, I'm old. Let's talk, last but not least, talk a little bit about supports here. And you wanted to highlight two. The first one was Cruz, who, if you watch the Reunited, E-United, We United, whatever part of
whatever first letter they want to put in there.
Yeah. Was the support there, and then was with Orgless and Hungry for this one. How did Cruz do? Well,
something I think is interesting about Cruz particularly is that, yes, he did start out playing Lucio, and he was a very, very solid IGL. Then we saw him actually restructuring they restructured their entire team basically around Cruz. We saw E United playing a lot of dive. It was centered around the dive. They played that quite well. They just kind of struggled with other things. Then recently, they had a chat between Morte, who fell into the coaching role away from the support role that he was playing. And they talked about it, and they were like, look, I think something that might help you out as a player individually is move back to that IGL. Yes, you have the ability to flex, and I think there's a parallel to be drawn there with actually Shaz of LAG, because Shaz actually does have the ability to kind of flex to Genji a little bit, and we saw that. I want to say that was in the preseason week that we saw in Numbani. We saw Shaz go over to Genji just for a moment. I don't think that was regular season. I think it was preseason.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, on Numbani.
But there's certainly parallels to be drawn there because he is a fantastic mechanical player. The difference being that Cruz is playing playing Lucio and can flex to Genji. And he has a lot of awareness. His IGL is probably among the best that you can possibly find right now. Surprised to see that he didn't actually get picked up by someone else, but they wanted to do something different with Orgless and Hungry. Morte being involved a little bit more on the macro level and everything, because he does do a lot there. So I think Cruz is a fantastic player to look at because of his flexibility, because of his mechanical ability on Lucio, and primarily I think because of his communication level, his ability to IGL in a lot of these games as well.
So last player I wanted to talk about is Crusade. And this is a player who went from Cyclone to Cyclowns. What tournament was that in the middle of that they dropped?
Cyclowns.
Wasn't it like Team Story, or it was one of the house ones, right?
Yeah, I think that was Takeover.
I
think it was
yes.
right before. I think it was right before Takeover and right after Pit, because Cyclones didn't make it into Pit, I believe, or it was right after or something like that. It was in that kind of stage of time where Sideshow got his big moment and stood out, I think, around above all of us other plebs and everything,
Whatever. But and he's got a long track record. Cyclone, Cyclowns, Laser Kittens, Cloud9 EU, then was with those guys, and now again British Hurricanes. Definitely a support to watch for you.
I would say Crusade, absolutely. No matter the composition, because there are 3 supports on those guys roster. Funny Astro has brought in a lot if they want to be using a Lucio specific composition. Funny Astro actually, I think 16 years old if I'm not mistaken, so another young talent there that was spotted out by Nuki. But despite whatever composition they wanted to go for, Crusade was always the support they seemed to want in those situations that really had a big impact. So looking at their grand finals, Crusade was in for every single map. Looking at a lot of their late dives in the playoffs, Crusade was in pretty much every single map, if not every single map. So very, very strong player, a staple for them. Does have the ability to play Lucio, does have the ability to flex support, playing Zenyatta, playing Ana, playing Moira. All of those heroes he can play, as well as picking up as the Mercy. So I think Crusade is probably someone to talk about just because he's so strong on every single different support character. He's very mechanically inclined with Zen. He can land those shots. Maybe not as much as someone like Crimzo, who I think is probably one of the better mechanical players on that particular character, but he's still up there, very efficient. His Ana's very solid. He can definitely play Moira. He can definitely play Lucio, among the best of them as well. So definitely a player to think about, as well as he's just so diverse in his hero pool.
Awesome. Well, Heurix, Dude, thanks so much for doing this. I love this. For people who don't already, follow Heurix on Twitter at CTHeurix. And also, this is kind of a new test thing. You'll notice I've been trying a few different things with the show, testing out different types of segments and what should we put in Owl Daily Prime and what should maybe just go on YouTube separately and stuff. But I think the Tier 2 scene is really important. We want to really do our best here to make sure that it is nurtured and grows, and people who want to be knowledgeable in it have the avenues to do that. So definitely make sure to give us your feedback as well as I liked it, or I would like to see this changed, or do that somewhere else. I don't know. But again, Heurix, thanks, man. Anything else?
We'll have to start Overwatch Pit Daily, like you talked about.
Daily,
we'll have to start that.
Yeah. TM, by the way, don't even try it out there, guys.
We've got everything locked down.
Yeah.
Everything's copyrighted. We have the website already. Don't even try. But no, that's it from me. I think the main thing is, just making sure that these players are talked about. And I want to thank you for having me on to talk about them, because I've been wanting to talk about them. I love talking about these players. They're players that I've been keeping my eye on a lot. I especially on the NA side, I would say. But I really commend you for diving into this, because it's great for these players who are going to be the legends of tomorrow. So definitely cool to see a little bit of content coming out about them.
Well, you're too kind, Heurix. Thanks again. I'm sure I'll see you soon on another episode of Overwatch League Daily.
Probably, or Overwatch Pit Daily.
My thanks to Heurix for stopping by on the show today. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at CTHeurix. We're not going to have a show tomorrow. I'm going to be out of town briefly, so thanks for your patience with that. But then on Sunday, I will be back with another episode of Overwatch League Daily. If you like the show, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or your podcast app of choice so you don't miss future episodes. You can also watch or listen to the show at winstonslab.com. You can also find links to everything at overwatchleaguedaily.com. And of course, email me, overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com. Thanks again to Heurix for joining me. I'll be back on Sunday with another episode of Overwatch League Daily.